This is the Three Skeevers Podcast.
All right. Episode 3 of the Three Skeevers Podcast with Grim from Grimsforge Gaming and myself, Icy. How you doing, Grim?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. And I don't know if you had a chance to check out the AoE changes, but Smite is great. I'm having a lot of fun playing Arena, and I'm having a blast with Hell. She's a great support. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if ESO's going to global cooldowns or whatever, we might as well make the jump to a game that started out using global cooldowns from day one.
Yeah, because I went in there just to test abilities. I haven't actually done actual gameplay itself to see if the server is improved. But oh man, it just throws me back to Smite, League of Legends, all those other types of games that do run off cooldowns in general. And yeah, it just doesn't really interest me to even bother checking out Cyrodiil any further than what they're doing now with the testing. But from talking to one of the guys, I think that we're mutual friends with in ESO, he said that he's running on his Nightblade with just single target abilities, and he hasn't noticed any sort of improvement on the servers. He still can't. He's still having issues similar to what we were having with bar swapping, things not going off when they should, that type of thing. So
I don't know what he's complaining about. Like, I just jumped on my Stamplar and I lay down my defensive rune, wait 3 seconds, and lay down my ritual, wait 3 seconds, then biting jabs the enemy, wait 3 seconds, biting jabs them again, wait 3 seconds. And, as long as I've got a good 30 seconds to fight somebody on my Stamplar, I'm good, man.
with a 9-second pre-buff or preparation buffs before the fight starts.
Yeah, I'm probably, by the time I get those two things down, I'm going to be in full blown trying to recover and heal from whatever's happened to me. But yeah, as far as Stamplars go and Magplars, it's not a good situation for them for sure.
Yeah, I even read in zone chat somebody was like, "My Magplar is complete trash now." I just kind of laughed and went about my day.
Yeah.
So, anyways, today we're talking about 1vxing. We had some comments in episode 2's comment section asking for some dissection, if we can go over in depth 1vxing in general, how people do it, scenarios, what's a better way to go about 1vxing, that type of thing. Do you want to add to that, Grim?
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to thank Mario. I wanted to thank Leon for posing those questions. And I think it's a great topic right now, too, considering the Imperial City event is going on. And so we have kind of this influx or a lot of PvEers down in that area, and they're getting their full exposure, I guess, to PvP. And anyways, the forums, ESO forums or whatever, there's a lot of negative posts. Why can't we just do our questing, and we run into people and they're unkillable. And so I think this is probably a really good topic to talk about. I did do a video how to fight outnumbered, and I'll link that in the descriptions. It talks about a lot of different things and some of the tactics, techniques that we use when we're fighting outnumbered, but and some of those things we will talk about here today. But I think it's a really, really cool topic, and I'm excited to talk about it. How about you?
Yeah, no, it's something I can say I actually have some experience in a couple of those scenarios that we'll go over a little bit later. But yeah, no, I can't wait to share what I got.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is first to not talk about 1vxing. You have to establish a baseline of understanding for people. And I think this message is to the PvEer and this message is to the PvPer alike. Okay. The very first thing is this: take a PvEer, because the majority of people that play Elder Scrolls Online will be PvEers, and talk about the very best PvEer, the very best person that's doing trials and they're parsing, I don't know what it is, 80K, 90K, 100K DPS, 130. Do you know, Icy, what the top parses that you've heard of?
I think we can. I'm not sure what the top parses are, but I see it all depends what setup they're using. But for this example that we're talking about, we can just say 90k DPS, which it was certainly achievable, and I think that'd be an okay number to work with in terms of if you're doing 90k DPS, you're pretty good. You're really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So 90K DPS, we'll say, represents the upper tier of PvE. And to achieve 90K DPS as a PvEer, it requires dedication to the process, the maturation process. It requires that you have a very specific set of gear. It requires that you have a very specific loadout, or abilities and rotation, right? And it's the perfect storm. It's somebody that's practiced that rotation with that specific gear set, and they're able to achieve that. It doesn't come overnight usually, and the same scenario for that exists for PvP as well. But if you or if I were to put on that same gear that person's doing, I probably would not hit 80 or 90k DPS to start, because I didn't go through the maturation process. I don't know what the rotation is. I haven't practiced the rotation. It's new to me still. And just having the gear is not going to make it happen. And so that kind of brings me along back to, Mario had said, because I pretty much copied a 1vxer's build, but still feel like I melt. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the PvP side of it. But just because you put the gear on in a PvP atmosphere or PvE or PvP atmosphere does not guarantee success. There needs to be a maturation process with that gear and the rotation. And so what can I put you on the spot a little bit, Icy, and ask you when you started parsing, like what was your first parse that you did when you were doing trials?
So without doing any parsing, I think I am getting some feedback on your end, but
Okay.
that's okay. So if I go back to when I was still a new player in November, I think I remember in a vet Hellraw Citadel thinking I'm hot shit. I was doing 12k, maybe even 15k DPS at
Okay.
a good moment, and I was like, hey, I'm doing pretty good with my light attacks, and I had no idea that I knew I was being carried, but I didn't realize how bad it was. And several months later, I understood the error of my ways, and then I found the group that I'm with now, and they taught me a little bit how to DPS, as well as talking to some other guys before, and I was actually able to increase my numbers from 12k to I got as high as 35k with some make believe setup that I was running, and they were like, "Yeah, I see. You can't be running this. You're not even going to come close to 70, 80k, 90k DPS running with what you're running." And
Yeah.
I was able to get, after I learned about animation canceling and light attack weaving for parsing and stuff, then I was able to just make that, just with that basic knowledge, I was able to jump from 12k to 35k, which put me at a limit with the build. But I think if I gave that build to one of my experienced guys who can consistently put out 80k DPS, 90k DPS, whatever, I think they could actually get better numbers with the setup I was running, even though it was DPS wise, not optimal, but they could still do it just because they know how
Better
to
numbers
parse.
than what you did, right?
Right, same
Yeah.
exact build as me, but they could achieve better numbers because I was not doing a correct rotation. Just because you're animation canceling your abilities, and so you're maintaining 100% uptime on everything, doesn't mean that's going to increase your DPS. You still got a light attack weave. You still got to do certain things, and it's not just do this, do this, do this, do this. No, it's do do 1 2 1 2 1 3 1 4 1 2 1 2 1 3 1 5, and a whole bunch of crazy combinations like that. From what I understand, looking at a few of the popular parsing builds out there, but does that answer your question? I almost forgot what the question was.
Yeah, it was just what was your experience with parsing? When you first started parsing, you were where?
Okay, yeah, so I
And
started at 12K. I got as high as 35K before I decided to just give up entirely on parsing in general and just become a support
yeah, and so
through and through.
35K is more than some people achieve in their entire stay in ESO. They've been here for 4 years, 5 years. They've been here from day one, and that's what they do is 40K DPS, right?
Absolutely.
And so that means the disparity or the gap between your upper tier and what everyone else is doing is like 40K DPS, 30K DPS, 20K DPS. If it's 20K DPS, that's a lot, right?
Hmm.
The gap between the upper tier and the baseline or the average is huge. Okay, and this is discussing the PvE world. That same gap exists in the PvP world as well. And I have a video and I can link it in the descriptions, but it's assessing what power level are you in PvP or what level are you. And I have it broke down to 4 levels, a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4. And a level 4 is your 1vxer. And so that's a video worth everybody's time or listen, on while you're riding on your way to work. Leon said he likes to listen to these on his way to work, and I think that's awesome. But the gap between your 1vxer and everyone else that just enjoys PvPing is big as well. And so what you'll see is, like, if you watch my battlegrounds that I do for all the different videos, because I don't spend a lot of time on a specific character, and I don't drive, my MMR doesn't continue to drive up on that character. That's why my MMR is low. I have been high MMR before they got rid of groupings. I was very high MMR, and so I'm running around with Fangrush and everybody else, like all these content creators and elite level guys, and it was freaking awesome. It was awesome. But when they got rid of grouping for battlegrounds and I started doing content, I never spent a lot of time on specific characters, but I always get people that comment low MMR, like that degrades what is happening or that devalues what's happening in it. And it does a little bit because I have been in high MMR and I do 1vx and I do these things like that. And when I go to a BG, I'm running around with people that, while BGs are no CP, you'll still see, under 100 CP sometimes in my battlegrounds, or you'll see people that are less than 810,
Hmm.
and so that does come into a factor, not the level of their CP, but the level of their experience that they've gained. Their maturation process is directly correlated with that number, somewhat. And so, but there's a huge disparity between, everybody needs to understand that there's huge gap between the highest PvPers and even the mid-tier PvPers, and it's almost the same gap as what's happening in the PvE world. Okay, and so now that I've established that understanding, PvEers might not realize that, but PvPers are saying, PvPers are overpowered, or they're this, they're that, but PvPers would say the same about you. in the PvP atmosphere, PvE atmosphere. It depends on where you're competing at. If a PvEer comes to PvP world and they're participating in PvP, that's not a fair fight, right? And the PvEer, say we take that 80 or 90k DPS guy and we bring him to PvP world, and he walks in, kicks the door in, and he says, I parse 90k. Prepare yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think everybody knows how that's going to go, because PvP and PvE are two different animals. The way the damage works, PvE is about parsing or sustained damage over a extended period of time. Managing your resources applies to both, but managing your resources over an extended period of time is very different than managing your resources over burst and fighting outnumbered. And so the PvEer kicks the door in the PvP world, says, prepare yourselves, I bring 90k heat, and just gets smoked. Doesn't like it at all. Can't figure it out, because he's like, I didn't even get like three rotations into my, I didn't even get 3 abilities into my rotation. What the hell? That guy's cheating. And the thing is, it's just two different animals. It's two completely different animals. PvP. Now let's change the roles. Now you're 1vxer, and the 1vxers usually will flat out tell you this, like, I suck in dungeons. It's not that I'm going to die in dungeons or vet dungeons or trials. The PvPer in a vet dungeon or trial is usually one of the last ones standing, because they're used to that, right? But when you start looking at the numbers, yeah, you brought your 12k DPS, congratulations, and it's because their rotation, their everything is very different than the PvEer. And so I don't think that you're going to see 1vxers, kick the door into PvE trials world and like, stand back, everybody, I'm about to show you something,
Mm-hmm.
But that's just the way it works. And the disparity or the gap between the PvPer coming into PvE and doing a trial, his DPS compared to the guy that's doing the 80 and 90k, huge gap.
Right.
So if we're judging them in PvE world, we know who's going to win. And that's because we've established why. They have the right gear set up for it. They have the right rotation, the right, training. They put the time into their rotation. They were born and raised in that atmosphere. Your PvPers, if we bring the PvEer over to the PvP world, your PvPer, your elite level PvPers were born and raised in that world. And they took their lumps and they figured out how to line a sight. They figured out how to fight multiple people outnumbered, how to line up their burst, how to survive in that world. And your PvEers have not yet. And so every time a PvEer posts a negative post about PvP's broken, this, that, and the other, you haven't, I don't know for a fact how much time you spend in there, but every time I read that, I think that they haven't spent any considerable amount of time in PvP, or they haven't found a good mentor or a good trainer, and that's on them to do. One's
Right.
not going to fall in their lap. So if you want to be better at PvP, you need to find a mentor. If you want to be better at PvE and you want to parse better, you need to find a mentor, somebody that can help you with your gear and your rotation and all that. The same rule, that rule applies on both sides of the fence. So, but because there's far more PvEers than there are PvPers, there's a lot louder voice, for PvE or from PvEers saying PvP's broken and these guys are unkillable and this and that. And they're not unkillable. And so I think, does that make sense, IC? Does that all make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with the mentor part, I've had a couple people, including yourself, help give me tips on how to improve. my parse and things like that. And they're definitely, I think, more mentors for PvE in terms of parsing, because there are countless guilds out there all doing trials, and they have their requirements. Hey, you need to be able to do 50k DPS. And I think for the most part, a lot of guilds, they'll take the time and they'll help you, even if you're just a nobody. I know one of the guys that we met out in the sewers one time. The I think I forget his name. We just called him Q, but he was running that Necro healer with
Mm-hmm.
Ebon and Sanctuary, and he was the first guy to show me how to do a rotation, how to animation cancel, set me up with the right add-ons and stuff. But for PvP, aside from you, I feel like there's not that many people out there who are willing to mentor as much as what we've been through. I know there are people out there, I've seen them, where they'll kind of do dueling coaching, where, okay, they'll do a duel and what'd you learn? You're not doing this, you're not doing that. So I'll see a lot of that going on, but yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like it would be a lot easier to find a PvE parsing mentor compared to a PvP mentor in general for whatever it is you're trying to do. Maybe if you were dueling, I think that would be a lot easier, but for open world fighting and stuff, they're out there for sure, but I'm not sure how easy it would be to find them.
Right. And then the question becomes, are they somebody that you're willing to learn from? Because, you know, in the PvE world, it's player versus environment, and you can meet a lot of, you know, a husband-wife combo like Nice and Ara, and they're awesome people, just really, really cool people to know from Great Glory. And you meet these people, and they are willing to help any way they can, you know. 9 times out of 10 in the PvP world, you meet somebody. I don't want to say 9 times out of 10. We're going to say 50% of the time, okay? 50% of the time you meet someone in the PvP world and they have a chip on their shoulder, you know, or they're young and cocky or whatever, you know. 50% of the time they're not going to be someone that you want to learn from,
Right.
and that's just kind of, or they're not willing to teach. So but so that kind of makes it there even more of a difficulty in finding people that are willing to talk about 1vxing, teach 1vxing, and teach fighting outnumbered and everything about all the different classes and how they, you know, how it works. So
Yeah, and even if they do show you how to do it, and there are countless videos out there, people showing you, I guess not deliberately showing you, but you can see it through the videos how they're doing it, but without an analytical commentary over it, you kind of have to figure it out yourself. And
yeah.
I guess this is kind of going to segue into the next topic. Did you want to start that one with the different types of 1vxing?
Yeah. You know, I think what you're talking about too is the why. The why is very important. I get it in my build videos. I get it in um, what power level are you? That video. I get it all the time. People are always like, man, your long-winded explanations are not needed. Get to the point. And they actually are needed. Maybe
Hmm.
that person doesn't need them, but there are more people that do want to hear it, because the why is very important. And like I said in the previous episode, you know, I'm a coach, a consultant, and I train people in combat sports, fighting Bellator, the UFC, bare knuckle boxing. And as a coach, one of the coaching tips or tricks that I teach other gym owners and other trainers and fighters that are aspiring to be a coach is you want to interact with the person that you're coaching, and you want to inspire them to use their brain, which is the, you know, the most valuable weapon they have. And so there's a lot of times that when I'm teaching a technique, it's very important that you tell them why. Here's why we do this technique right here, right now. Here's why. And then later we come back to it and I say, why do we do this? Or it later could be a week later, and just randomly, as we're practicing that technique, why do we do this right now? And I want everyone to be able to explain to me the why, because if they can explain the why, then they start to really understand things. They start
Yes.
to really truly understand. And so anyways, the why is super important. If people don't think so, then that's fine. They don't need to know.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. So let's talk about the how. That's an interesting topic, the how. Okay, so let's talk Imperial City to start. Right now we got the Imperial City event going on, and we're going to talk about composition, we're going to talk about armor. A really good question. So Mario had brought up, I pretty much copied a 1vxer's build, but I still feel like I melt. Then Icy and I started the conversation, well, what's more important, the build or the maturation process of learning to line of sight, where to be, where not to be, how to stretch out the enemy, and kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg, And so we started this conversation. And what was your thoughts on that, Icy?
I think my thoughts were the if we're talking about you want to copy this guy's exact build, I think the gear has to come first, but not the exact gear that what your end goal is going to be. And I like to think of myself, my training process to how I have with how I'm running my Earth Core Shacklebreaker transmutation setup. That's my final build that I run all the time now when I'm down in the sewers or IC. But to get there, I had to learn the skills first to survive with that setup. Which before the final gears piece, I had to learn the skills. But in order to learn the skills, I needed another type. I needed to wear a different type of gear that would allow me the opportunities to learn the skills. So my first gear set were survivability type stuff: Thervacoon, Impreg, and some other heavy armor gear set that would just allow me to survive in the PvP environment. And as the months went on, as the weeks and months went on, I was able to shed some of the gear off. Now that I was slowly evolving, learning how to play, and I could, okay, maybe I can go in light armor, which I did try. And at that point, after running around, learning how to line of sight, learning about blocking and reading the fights, that type of thing, I was able to actually transition from heavy armor to a light armor setup and still do what I was doing. But then after speaking with some guys, I was kind of selling myself short because if I ever got bursted in my light armor build, I'd be less likely to recover. Whereas if I was in heavy armor with the same setup, just opposite, where for this example, if I was running transmutation as my light armor gear and then shacklebreaker as my jewelry and weapons, there's my light armor setup there. But if I just swap it, put shacklebreaker because it's a craftable set, I can put shacklebreaker in heavy armor and then run transmutation on the weapons and jewelry. Now I have a heavy version of that same setup. And next time I get surprised with a necro ulti, instead of getting one shot and being killed, I now have an opportunity to survive the burst and recover and continue the fight. And
Yeah.
it's learning those things, but first you have to start out with some training wheels if you don't already have the skills to use the top level gear that you want to mimic. You want to, what's the other word I'm looking for here? I guess not even another word. If you want to copy some guy's gear and you don't have the skills that he's showing or showcasing in those videos, you're going to be disappointed. You can't really complain.
Right. And I agree with that. So the thing is this, it's fine to find a 1vxer build and put that on. You're going to need to know what that build feels like under pressure, under duress, as you're recovering from being bursted, as you are operating on 0 stamina or 0 magicka, and how do you get back into the fight, when the tank's running dry on that particular build. So that's fine. I do think that a couple things. It could be that particular build, but instead of running infused weapon damage on all the jewelry or infused spell damage or whatever, run recoveries. Run recoveries on the jewelry. It's not going to have the bite that the 1VXer has, but it's going to have the additional sustain for you to get used to the build, to take your lumps, to figure out the other stuff. And so that's one thing. The other thing is you don't need to jump into a 1VX scenario. I put the 1VXer's gear on, therefore I must go 1VX. No. Go with your friends, 2VX, 3VX, do small group stuff and keep the build exactly the way the 1VXer has. If he has infused weapon damage, you're going to find out real quick if that build's going to be able to sustain for you or not in a small group. And it might be a little easier. The lumps that you take then might be a little easier than if you're out by yourself. You got nobody. You got nobody to peel off of. You got nobody to throw out any heals, throw down that extra CC. It's you versus the world. And sometimes those lumps are really rough, and you'll go out and have an experience with that. In your first experience, you might want to trash the entire armor set. You golded it out and everything, which reminds me of that Nightblade that we ran into.
Oh yeah, he definitely made me laugh. Because I
Yeah,
think I asked him, hey, we decided to invite him into our group, and I think we were fighting a banner, and he died a couple times, and I asked him, hey, you might want to re check out your rethink your build or something, and he's like, no, the build's good. It's just got some sustain issues. And I asked him, well, what build are you running? And so that he linked everything. And then you were like, that's Grim Hollow's build.
yeah. And it was really funny too, because he went out of his way to get the exact skin and do everything that Grim Hollow had. So I kind of had an inkling that, that's the direction he was going. And that particular build at the time, I think, was New Moon and Clever Alchemist. And if you know those armor sets, they have 0 max stats in them, 0 recoveries. It's just pure unadulterated damage, just get ready. We're bringing the house.
Right.
And a very stiff maturation process has to happen with that type of armor setup for some people when they don't have max stats, they don't have recoveries, and they have all the weapon damage they'll ever need. But if you're trying to 1VX, how many people are you going to be able to kill before your resources and sustain becomes a problem? And it takes a long time. The maturation process with that type of build takes a long time to grow into. And now we have people like Grim Hollow, at the time, that was his armor setup at the time, who's just marching through open world Cyrodiil, killing 20 people and just God tier, right? And so that's that particular build in that individual's hands, and it's a very dangerous build. But if you put it on a newer person, they're just going to struggle with it starting out, and they're going to need to spend time with it. So,
And I think there are maybe 2 exceptions, or I'm not sure if I consider them exceptions or not, but if you're high, if you're a player with high skill level, then copying somebody else's build might not be an issue for you. I've
right.
seen people do it all the time. Hey, what are you running on this? Then, oh, okay, cool. You try it on. Oh yeah, this is really strong. But if it's something kind of unique, then you're at that point, it kind of reminds me of the Mandalorian build when I first.
Mhm.
I think that was the first build I've ever copied from somebody, which is just your build, and I knew what I was getting into. I can't just try it and I get stomped and say, "Yeah, Grim, the build's terrible, man. I know you
Right.
put out a BG where you just went like 20-0, but I tried it myself. It sucks." I don't have the right to say that because first off, I'm not you. Secondly, I'm just trying it for the first time and my PvP skill level is so low compared to you. Who the hell do I think I am to say that? And when I was trying the build, I watched the BG because the music's awesome and I love the finesse and the gameplay of it. I watched it 5 6 times so I can learn the play style, get used to it, and say to myself, okay, this is how I need to play it. I need to look for these types of situations and then work within that sandbox of opportunities. And if I can do that, then I'll have some success because that's kind of how you do it. If I were to copy Grim Hollow's build, I'd have to put on some glasses and just become Grim Hollow to play his build so I can emulate everything exactly the way he does. Because if I try to copy his build and play it the way I would play it now, I'd flounder. It wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah. I don't think also, you were talking about watching the Mandalorian videos, and you had said this one time, you're like, Grim got out of that situation or evaded that situation. It never works when I try it, or
Oh yeah, the classic Nightblade scenario where when Grim Hollow does it, it works every time. When I do it, it never works. When I try to jump on somebody and burst them, they don't take any damage. But when a Nightblade jumps on me, I get bursted. Or when I'm trying to escape and cloak out, the guy always finds me every single time. But God forbid I don't have any stealth detection pods, the guy's gone. I'll never see him again until he comes back and kills me from behind. I remember having those issues in the beginning. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and I still do every once in a while.
What you're talking about is actually the benefit. One of the unknown benefits, or I guess underrated benefits of being a content creator. As a content creator, everybody doesn't take into account how long somebody's recording before they get that 4 minutes or 3 minutes or 30 seconds. They could have been recording for 8 hours just to get that 4 minutes. And so that kind of glorifies that moment for them, and everybody thinks that that is achievable all the time. Like, that's just how it works. As a content creator, that's just going to happen. That's what you're looking for. You want the really cool clips. I can tell you this, and a lot of people, I don't think you and I've even talked about this before, and maybe we have. When I go into BGs, so when you guys are looking at my battleground footage and I'm testing gear, I actually go into the battleground with like a list in front of me or a mental note of what I want to accomplish during that battleground. And if you go back and watch the last Spartan Battleground, Spartan Unleashed 2.0 Battleground, going into that battleground, I wanted to be overly aggressive at times. And I had to remind myself of that. At the beginning of the video, I had a perfect opportunity. There was a fight on the flag, and I had a perfect opportunity. I went through, and it was a knockdown drag out fight. At the end of it all, it was me and 3 or 4 purples. And I had an opportunity to go into them. I chose not to go back into them because when you're up on at that particular map up on the pedestal, there's no line of sight. And it would play to my disadvantage to fight outnumbered in that moment. If I had line of sight, I would definitely went to fight them. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to look for an objective and go to it. And then I was upset at myself because I clearly had on my list, I want to put the build under pressure, under stress, and see how it handles it. And that might sound a little funny, like I'm disconnecting myself from the build, like I'm not operating it, but that's how I approach it. I want to see what this build does. And so I was upset. I ran to the next objective, and then I thought, well, that was my chance, and I didn't do it. And I was like, I'm going to make sure for the rest of the time I'm recording, I'm going to do really overly aggressive type. I'm going to go in with no stamina and try and fight 3 people and see how I can line of sight and recover from it. It wasn't me showing off. It was me subjecting myself and the build to the scenario needed to see if the build could withstand and recover. I don't think I know this to be true, that I don't think that a lot of people will be able to do the same things starting out. I don't want them to try and do that same thing. That was me actually testing the build. I don't want them to go and take that build and just go, well, Grim can fight 4 people, fight 3 people and win. I should be able to do it with this build too. Eventually, yes. You know, not all scenarios are created equally. The participants change. There's a lot of other variables, so not always are you going to have the same results, you know. But so that's a thing. I also went into that video, and I said I'm going to use both of my ultimates in various different ways. You know, I was using the Berserker Strike 2-hand ultimate, and I said to myself, I want to use that ultimate in an outnumbered situation to see where its benefit lies, as opposed to on my backboard or on my back bar. I am sword and board, and I want to use the sword and board ultimate and stay in the fight and see what that feels like. Because the armor set that I was running was Titanborn, and we've paired it with Eternal Vigor. And so both of those ultimates have the potential to slow the death process. You know, the sword and board ultimate, you're still taking damage even though you're blocking all incoming damage freely, and that allows me to hang out at the 75 or the 50% and turn get the full benefit of Titanborn and be that much more dangerous. The 2-hand ultimate gives you just ridiculous resistances, making you ultra tanky. And while there is a cap to resistances, you're never going to, the amount of resistances that the 2-hand ult gives you when you bonk a tank or somebody with significant resistances is like 50-60k. You can watch a video and see. So in that moment, no amount of debuffs on me, major or minor fracture, is going to make me fall below cap resistances. So what's the 2-hand ultimate feel like? But I go into those battlegrounds with an idea of what I want to try, and that equals practice as well. All the while I'm testing these different gear sets, and some do better than others, some make it a little easier than others, you know. I'm practicing fighting with 0 stamina and bringing the fight back and killing 2 or 3 people. I'm practicing and learning which ultimate brings more value to the table under that in that moment, under that scenario, and it makes me better for it. It's practice. Battlegrounds are practice, and when I'm testing gear, I'm using these line of sight tactics or methods that I know work, and giving myself additional requirements of, you know, different checklists. And I disconnect myself. It's not a lack of player skill, even though it is, you know, me dodge rolling off of I was on my Stamplar Sword Saint, and I'm chopping through people and have 3 people lined up in front of me that I could kill, and I dodge roll off to my death, you know. So but I think that process in using battlegrounds in that fashion is very important, and practicing like that is very important. You could do dueling. If you want to be a superior duelist, then practice dueling. If you want to be superior at 1vxing and fighting outnumbered, battlegrounds is the perfect place to practice that. You can throw yourself very quickly. You can find the fights, right? You queue for it. We're there. You know, I don't have to jump on my mount and ride around, you know, in Cyrodiil and look on the map to figure out where the fights are at, and then I have to deal with siege as well and things like that. I'm not talking down about that PvP. I think that PvP is extremely fun as well when it works. But battlegrounds are the best place to hone your 1vx skills and put yourself in outnumbered situations. And I hope, from what I hear, they're going to be bringing back grouping for battlegrounds too. So I'd love to team up with a lot of you guys and jump into battlegrounds. It would be awesome. But what's your thoughts on that, Icy, and using battlegrounds in that fashion?
So for the group BGs, I am super excited because when I first started playing PvP, group BGs were a thing, but my skill level was a PvEer. But now that I'm a seasoned individual in PvP, I can't wait to go in there with you because it's gonna be
Yeah.
a lot of fun now. So,
Dude,
but
back then we smashed people.
oh yeah, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh man, this is awesome, great. And then they took it, they pulled the rug from under me, and nope, you're done. Oh, okay. But so I'm excited for that. And in terms of the checklist for BGs, we never spoke about it, but I do find that very interesting, and it kind of reminds me of the 4 levels of learning. You level 1 being unconscious incompetence. Level 2 is conscious incompetence. Level 3, conscious competence, and then level 4, unconscious competence. And I feel like most people, when they enter BGs, they're just playing it to play it. And maybe they think they're consciously competent, but really they're at level 1 with unconsciously incompetent, just doing whatever it is that they're doing, reacting to everything that's going on. But since you mentioned the checklist, I'm thinking, yeah, if you went in with a list saying, okay, I want to get better at this, and you're acknowledging that, first off, you're acknowledging that you want to improve, so that already pulls you out onto level 2, which is now you're consciously incompetent, so you're looking to improve and judge situations and put yourself in the situations that you want to be. I know for myself, when I recorded my StamDK videos or clips, I strategically only did anything except deathmatch because deathmatch just too sweaty for me. I'm a support player in PvP. I don't like being a DPS in PvP, so I would pick the land grab, chaos ball, domination, capture the flag, those types of things, because playing around an objective provides another level of damage mitigation for myself, because I'm just running around with two hands trying to fight people, and if people are distracted, for the most part, I can fight them in that sort of thing, and if I need to recover, I can run away, and most of the times they're not going to chase because there's bigger fish to fry. There's an
They're playing
objective.
the
They're
objective.
playing the
Yeah.
objective. But if you want pure PvP, oh yeah, deathmatch is definitely the way to go. Where people will run you down, and you have to work around that situation, which is kind of how the sewers work. I see all the open world stuff, and I think I agree 100%. If you want to improve your 1vx, BGs are definitely the way to go. But don't just go in there saying you want to improve and then just doing whatever. Hell, take notes, write down, have a little sticky note on your monitor that says, today I'm going to work on throwing myself into groups and using this ability, or testing this out. I want to do this or I want to do that. And believe it or not, you throw yourself at the wall 10 times wanting to go through it. By the 11th time, you'll realize there's a door right there that you could just walk through.
Yeah.
And that's going to start the process. So it's going to start the process, and then you'll start to improve. You'll figure something out. You'll come up with these other ideas and say, okay, I keep jumping in here. I keep dying instantly. Let me jump in here with this instead, with this active. Let me try and jump in here, then roll out and do something else. Or let me just try to focus the healers. Let me try to just pick out the squishies, whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah. If Another thing too. So yes, BGs are no CP, but if you want to know what you're going to do, if you want to gauge your competency or your ability to 1vx, queue for BGs and then run solo most of the time. Don't stick with your team and run off and do your own thing and see where your kill to death ratio is at afterwards, and throw yourself into the mix and try and fight outnumbered and things like that. And there are going to be a lot of people that might not like that answer, like, why are you wasting everyone else's time queuing for a BG and then not playing the objective? Well, because I want to get better at PvP. If you want to go grab that chaos ball and run around, feel free to do it, but I want to get better at PvP. And so another thing too is a couple other things, I guess. Number one, I was on a Discord screen share with somebody, and his average BGs were 8 and 8, 6 and 6, and that's just the way it went. And so I jumped on Discord with him, and he did a screen share and he queued for some battlegrounds, and it was very simple things. There was no magic to it. He was jumping into outnumbered situations, but then trying to face tank them once he engaged, and there is a time and place for that, and then there's not. And so as I was watching it unfold, there'd be 3 people up there, and I said, I want you to just stick your head out and let them see you, and then step back behind the wall and see if they all come or how many come. 2 of them stayed on the objective. 1 guy comes running after him. And I said, now we've created your Kung Fu movie, And he and I had talked about this before, and he laughed. But there could be 10 Kung Fu masters in the room, but if all 10 don't attack you at the same time and they just come in like a steady trickle, you're probably going to get your 1vx, as long as you win each one of those individual fights and you can sustain. And so 2 of them stayed on the objective. First one comes to him and he bursts down, kills the first one. And I say, okay, now go kill the other 2. And he runs out there and kills the other 2. And he's like, this is freaking awesome. And I was like, no magic there, right? You just tucked your head out around the corner, like, hey guys, and then tucked back, and one of them took the bait. And so anyways, after everything unfolded, he ended up being like 16 and 2, 18 and 2. And he was like, what the heck? This is freaking crazy. This is crazy right now. And I'm like, everything we did in that battleground was very simple stuff, right? And he goes, yeah, I could probably tell you 5 different times where I would have died had I not listened to what you said. There was one particular time where there was a team fight, and I said, go ahead and see who you can get. You start taking any heat, I want you to fall back and around the corner and then stop immediately and see if anyone follows you to try and secure the kill. And that's going to be the person you kill, and then go back in, And so there was like 3 or 4 times where he got easy kills like that too, And so anyways, he did another battleground, and it was like 18 and 2, 18 and 3, and then did another one. And he was like, geez, that just changes everything for me. Just very simple things like that. These things to be true, but then where and when to apply them and execute them on the fly, that's the hard part. And I said, that part only comes from throwing yourself at the wall or throwing yourself at the lion over and over and over again, and taking the lumps and learning it. So the maturation process. So
yeah, and even I think if you're throwing yourself that many times and you don't know, or not that you don't know, you're not taking notes, you might just figure it out instinctively and not realize it. Because I think some people, they just kind of get to a higher level just through brute force, and they're fine. They don't have any issues. So, but I think it just depends on the person, really.
yeah,
Kind of like those naturally gifted people who, not savants or anything, but hey, this guy never studies, but he gets good grades all the time in class. What's up with that? Kind of like, it's kind of like that kind of, that kind of thing. So
yeah. So I think that when you're talking about 1vx, you have a couple ways to ease into it. As a recap, one of them is start out with groups. I'm completely all for you getting a 1vxers build. Keep an open mind that it might not be the build that you finally rest on as your play style evolves and comes into play and starts fitting into it. That might not be the perfect glove or perfect fit for you, that gear set or loadout. And so be open to that. But I think that you should throw yourself into situations and battlegrounds, outnumbered situations. Don't worry about the objective so much. Maybe play the objective as best you can, but focus on a checklist of things and see how well you do running around on your own. Stay away from your team and see what you bring to the table, what your kill to death ratio is when you're throwing yourself into trouble in that build. Number two, if you're running open world Cyrodiil or you're running Imperial City, I think you need to start out with a small group scenario first, 2vxing, 3vxing. There's absolutely no shame in that. And especially with the Imperial City event going on right now, to try and 1vx during Imperial City, if as a streamer, I could probably record, 7 hours of streaming and there wouldn't be any like true 1v, like I just killed 20 people, because there's so many people running around in Imperial City right now, and it's such a small area, and you might be fighting this DC Zerg and having good success. Next thing you know, AD Zerg rolls in, or an AD Nightblade who's an elite level PvPer, smokes you. So there's so many scenarios on as far as that goes, but starting out with 2 people or 3 people, absolutely. Reign of Zeus, King of Games, and Nolan Kirchhoff teamed up, and those 3 guys are freaking beasts, and they're running around in Imperial City right now cleaning house. More times than not, it goes their way, and then there's some fights where it's just, it's a doozy. It's tough. So that's where I would start. I would start like that. And then the next thing is tweaking the gear. Even though it's 1vxer's gear and he's got infused weapon damage, I'd lean on the side of sustain to start until you're like, I'm sustaining just fine on this build. It's time to amp up the damage, and then change to a more aggressive version of that build. Put the weapon damage or spell damage or whatever on the jewelry and let it rip like that.
Absolutely. And I think with I guess when you're making those incremental changes, if you're moving from high recovery and slowly moving yourself into weapon damage, just say you're working all recoveries right now, but you want more weapon damage, pull off one jewelry enchantment, change it to weapon damage, play it for a week. Think your recovery's still good? Okay. Take off another one, make it weapon damage. Now you got 2 weapon and 1 recovery. Play it for another week. You know what? I think my sustain's still solid. I could probably come off my last jewelry enchantment. Now you got 3 jewelry. Now you got 3 weapon enchantments on your jewelry pieces. Run it for a week. Hey, I'm doing all right. And now you just gradually, over a 3-week period, gave yourself almost 1,000 damage added to your build.
Yeah.
Just by easing your way into the process. Because if you just did it from 0 to 3 and changed everything out in one shot, I don't think you'd be saying the same thing, because you didn't have that slow build up, just practicing with a different amount of recoveries coming in.
Yeah. Don't look for instant gratification if you're trying to get better at PvP. You're going to have glimpses and moments, maybe a day, maybe a couple days put together of, some amazing outings, but there's always this regulator, there's always this back to earth moment. And that's how, like in combat sports, that's how the actual champions are decided, or the real champions are the ones that stick through thick and thin, and they'll take the one good day and then the 5 bad days immediately following and keep striving to chain good days together. But so
Oh,
I
I
think,
do have one more thing.
yeah.
And if you're gonna copy somebody else's build, please copy the skills as well 100%,
Yes.
because I'll see somebody copy the whole build and they'll have different skills on their front bar, because their front and back bar, or maybe half of it will be what was on the original build, and then they go out, this build sucks,
Yeah.
and when you find out that they're using a totally different skills than what you were using, and you ask them, well, you're not even using the skills. Yeah, I didn't like the ones you were using. Well, well, then you can't complain, say my build's bad, because you're
Yeah.
not using the skills that I have on my bar. I think majority of the time, the skills also make the gear sets work. I'll give
Yeah.
you one example. When I was working with Emma, and he was showing me his Necro tank build with Harbingers, which everybody's using now, and it was good, but it wasn't great. And he was doing BGs and he was getting kills, that kind of thing. But it wasn't. It was a good build, but it wasn't great. And I said, Emma, you should try doing this change here. And he put that ability on his bar. The build's 100% viable, and now he gets hate messages on the regular just
Yeah.
because of one ability. I told him, take this one out, put this one in. Now the whole build changes completely. Now he
Yeah.
went from something that was okay, it works, but now he's virtually unkillable and he gets hate messages.
Yeah.
All
I
because of one skill change.
Yeah. I don't want anybody to think that when I share these builds, they have my stamp of approval. I can make them work. I understand that these builds might not work for other people because they're at a different point in their PvP journey or understanding. I 100% get that. They don't always get that.
Mhm.
And so and they don't always get that, but I get that. I get that they don't always get it. And so what I try and do is, here's another example. I put a build out there. It was using Shacklebreaker and New Moon. I get a message from a guy that says your build doesn't work. And then I say, what problems are you running into? He says it has 0 sustain. I like the damage.
That response is just so funny to me. 0 sustain, or like no sustain, or sustain is poor. You can keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's look at what you got. And I was like, are you running infused jewelry? He said no. And I had infused weapon damage jewelry on there because that's where I was at with the build. That's how I felt good on it. And I said, what's your enchants? And he's like, I'm trying to run regen, stamina recovery on all of them because the build doesn't have it doesn't have recovery. And I was like, okay, so I could only imagine if I was running with recovery on all 3 jewelry, like what the build would feel like. And so I was like, okay. And we go through this whole question and answer scenario. I ask him a question, he responds. I ask him a question, he responds. 4 or 5 questions in, 30 minutes in, I switched out Shacklebreaker for Ancient Dragon Guard.
Good Lord.
So you're running New Moon and Ancient Dragon Guard. Is Ancient Dragon Guard even remotely similar to Shacklebreaker? These are 2 different animals. Completely 2 different animals. You changed the build and then you went on to YouTube and you said this build didn't work, So that's to your point of what you were talking about. So if you're going to copy a 1vxer's build, this isn't to Mario specifically. This is just everyone. If you're going to copy a 1vxer's build, copy the build, the same armor sets. Don't change the armor sets because someone else told you that, this this set is awesome. And because now it's not that 1vxer's build, it's something you've created. It's something different, right? So
Yeah, even traits like
yeah,
this, for example, one guy runs all impen,
yeah,
and you, from your own PvP experience, you know what? I kind of like running with 3 well fitted and 4 impen. The
yeah,
build changes completely because now you're doing something else with the build just because you have more well fitted on there or more sturdy on there, and not the amount of crit resistance that was supposed to be part of the build.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess you can make an argument that, well, I mean, you're only pulling off 300 crit resistance. What does it really matter? Or 450, whatever the actual number is. But it kind of does, because
the,
now you're planning on doing something with it just by making those changes.
yeah. The devil's in the details.
It really is, especially for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So moving on, how do you 1vx? You spend a lot of time throwing yourself at that wall or at that lion, and there's a maturation process, and it's the perfect storm. You feel really good in the gear that you're running. You can sustain very well in the gear that you're running. You already know that you can fight outnumbered in the gear that you're running. And the perfect storm is the variable. The variable is who are you running into and where, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're running into PvEers, people that have not gone through the maturation process, don't have a good grasp or good understanding, you might get a really good clip. You know, you might get a really good video. You might have a really interesting or cool outing. If even in that group, say there's 10 of them, if there's 2 good PvPers in the group, like they're leading the group or whatever, you're going to have a hard time, because Cypher PK said this a long time ago, and he was probably the first one to echo this, and I've talked about this in other videos. He was the first one to say this. You don't 1vx good players. You don't 1vx good PvPers. You don't, because their understanding of sustain, their understanding of crowd control or CC, they're going to have you on your hard CC on cooldown. They're going to have you on your soft CC on cooldown. They're going to have you debuffed, and they're going to continue to apply pressure, and it's going to make you be on the back foot. And I'm not saying it can never be done, because you have abilities in the game like Pestilent Colossus. It's a game changer, you know.
And
You
usually always the answer.
and usually always the answer, yes. If you're on a necro, you should probably have Colossus on your bar. But I'm not gonna say it's doable without, you know, but anyways, the variable is who you're running into. And Cypher said this long ago, and this absolutely is true, that he would say, I could sit out in Cyrodiil for 10 hours recording just to get that 4 minutes, you know, and that's the 4 minutes everybody sees. And that's the footage that immortalizes me. That's the footage that defines me. That's my legacy. That's what everybody fears. Why everyone fears me is that 4 minutes. They didn't see the total of 2 hours of me being just zerged down, you know, and running around a rock, waiting for my opportunity or waiting for my moment, and it never presenting itself, you know, or it never shaking out the way I want. They don't see that, you know, and that's another benefit of being a content creator, is picking and choosing the content that you want, where you want. So I'd have to say that 1vxing is a little bit of magic. It's video editing magic. it's time spent, 10 hours of recording for that whatever. And that's absolutely true. If you want to know how you 1vx, though, it starts in battlegrounds, and then start 2vxing, 3vxing outnumbered situations in Cyrodiil and in Imperial City. And once you feel good with that, and you feel good with the build, and you'll know I could probably do this on my own, you know, and then start exploring doing it on your own.
Yes. Did you want to? Oh, go ahead.
I don't think there's any specific perfect gear set too. There used to be a time frame where Fury and New Moon clear cut meta, right? A thing about it too, King of Games was just talking about this, like a handful of content creators are talking about this. ZOS wants to shorten the skill gap. They want to shorten the skill gap between that highest tier PvPer and the mid tier to bottom tier, you know. And the highest tier PvEers that haven't PvP'd all that much, when they come over to PvP world, they're somewhere between middle of the pack and bottom of the barrel. That's just the way it is. It's not because of their lack of skill or their lack of desire. It's because of their lack of experience, you know, and they're also bringing a knife to a gunfight. They're bringing their PvE, you know, rotation and their PvE gear, and they're coming to a gunfight. And so those things don't bode well for them. But I don't think there's any specific gear sets right now that will save you from proc sets, you know, that will make it easier. And so we might see 1vxing as a dying art too, because we do have some people that are just amazing and they're out there every day and they're fighting by themselves and getting good clips or whatever. But the more proc sets that are introduced, I think King of Games said this. He's like, can you kick the crap out of a 10-year-old? Absolutely. Give the 10-year-old a gun and see what happens, you know? And he's like, now I'm fighting 10-year-olds, you know, and all 10 of them have guns. And that's what some of these proc sets are. If you think about it, these proc sets are, some of the proc sets are stackable and not cleansable. So you can get multiple people out of those 10-year-olds. All 10 are getting that dot on you if they make contact. And it's just, you know, crushing you. And so things like that will shorten the skill gap for sure, because we're going to see more and more people running around with proc sets on. And even though people shake their head and they're like, proc sets, and you know, you filthy proc set user, you need proc sets. Well, guess what? I got a surprise for you. Everybody's going to be using proc sets. If they're not already, they will be. And the reason is those purists, the elite level PvPers, are going to get sick of hamstringing themselves. They're going to get tired. Cypher said this long ago. He's like, why am I going to hamper myself? I'm the one fighting outnumbered. You know, if you guys want to introduce these proc sets to the game, I'm going to show you why you should nerf every single one of them. I'm going to equip them and start annihilating people. And your forums are going to be filled with people saying, you need to nerf this set. You need to get rid of this set. And so that's actually kind of a message to the elite level PvPers. Don't stay on the high horse or on your, you know, don't follow your, I don't need proc sets to kill people. You should abuse every single set that they put into this game and say, if you're going to give them a gun, you just gave me a cannon. And that's what needs to happen. Is the best PvPers need to start using these proc sets and just absolutely annihilating people, and make the developers kind of sit back and go, okay, well, hang on a second. Like, you know, now all of a sudden we have hundreds of posts about how broken these sets are. And that honestly is what needs to happen. But anyways, 1vxing might be a dying breed. And so I wouldn't set that as your final form or your goal. I want to be a 1vxer. That's going to happen on its own when the weather the wind blows a certain way and this guy decides to come into PvP, and you know, all these variables align. When the stars align, it'll happen for you. Don't worry about trying to force it. You'll stress yourself out. I think back, Ket Sparrowhawk, another content creator for YouTube, and Icy and I are running around Imperial City, and we run into this yellow group, and that moment was just a really, really cool moment. Do you know the one I'm talking about, where he was on Despair, I believe?
Yeah, I think he was on Despair, his Argonian Necro healer. I was on Senna, my CC Stam DK support tank, and I think you were on Old Man Kratos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were fighting the AD Zerg in the final zone in the EP side of the Molag Bal Center. So we had
Yeah.
just funneled back. We were funneling back to our tunnel, and that's where we encountered the mini Zerg there.
Yeah. I think we had one more with us, so there's 4 of us and like 20 of them. And the 4th one, I'll never forget, after we wiped that group, it wasn't you or I, it wasn't our first Zerg wipe, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't our first rodeo. I think it was Ket's. I don't know, maybe not. But the 4th guy, it absolutely was, because after we got done killing the full raid, he said, "Is this real life? Is this?" You remember that?
Yeah.
Is this real life? Did this just really happen, you know? And I'm just thinking, I hope there's more in the hallway, you know? And I'm like, running down, I was like, I want to find more, like. And it was a very cool experience, and it was very cool to share that experience with other people, you know? And I like that a lot. But so, to answer your question, another question, how to fight outnumbered, there's a lot of different tactics that you can use, and you just have to take notes and store them away for the day that you could potentially use them. Generally speaking, if you watch 1vxers, a lot of 1vxers handle it differently. Malcolm on his sorcerer handles 1vxing differently than King of Games handles 1vxing on his Stamsork. Different than Nolan Kirchhoff handles his 1vxing on his Stamplar. Different than Fang Rush on his Stamsork handles 1vxing or fighting outnumbered. And different than Buyer Core on his Magicka DK, handles fighting outnumbered. It's the class and the player's personal play style and what they've perfected and how they've perfected it. So when you're watching all them, you're watching it's different than Grim Hollow on his Nightblade 1vxing. How you handle 1vx on a Stam Blade is very different than how you handle it on a Sorcerer. Very different than how you handle it on a Mag DK. And so no 1vx is created equally. And when you go and you're watching the videos, you're watching for the level 1s and level 2s, and your eyes start training to see those people. The level 1s are just light attacking in a general direction, or they're using abilities that don't line up burst, wall of elements on the ground. And everybody can say, well, wall of elements is valuable, it does this or does that, or I'm using this staff that boosts my spell damage when an enemy's in my wall of elements. And okay, cool. But great, awesome, PvE-er, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no 1vx is created equally, but I can tell you this: if you're fighting a ball group, and this is something Icy and I talk about a lot, but generally speaking, let's talk about the sewers or an Imperial City. If you're fighting versus a ball group, you need to, there's a saying in PvP that's called, and the saying is the tail gets bit. And the tail gets bit applies to a lot of different things. Number one, if you're the last person through the door in the districts, you're very high likelihood that you're going to be ganked or jumped, right? Tail gets bit. If you're just standing there after your team cleared a portal and everybody else is running off, and you're in your inventory trying to make room to pick up the nice shiny new thing, there's a high likelihood you're going to get ganked or killed because the tail gets bit. And if you're in a ball group and the group moves and you do not, and you're texting the girlfriend, there's a high likelihood you're going to be killed. And so the tail gets bit. When you encounter a ball group, we'll talk about down in the sewers. We run into a ball group and we can tell that they're PvEers, right? There might be one or two. It's not to say that they're true full blood PvEers. There are some people, they've had PvP experience. They might not have had your level of PvP experience, but they know how to PvP. We attack the guy dies, But generally speaking, you can throw yourself into that group. And for me, what I do is I throw myself into the group, make sure that I can get out, but I throw myself in, burst on them, maybe drop a Dawnbreaker or whatever, try and hit as many as I can to see if I could kill any of them in that moment. I will try to, but more importantly, I want to see a couple things when I throw myself into a ball group and I drop a Dawnbreaker on them. Number one, I want to see how hard the Dawnbreaker hits all of them. I'm going to take a quick name count or head count of people that the Dawnbreaker really hits hard, because those are people that are exceptionally squishy. And when I want to start thinning the herd, those will be some of the first people that I have a high likelihood to burn them down before the healer can save them.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that I'm looking for is who's throwing up the heals. So I can do a quick head count if there's 2 or 3 people in the room that start throwing up rapid regen, and what type of burst heals do we have Templars in the group, and what's happening, as far as recovering from that burst. And so we're doing a quick count. There might be a time and place where I throw myself into a group, I drop a big Dawnbreaker, virtually no damage happens, and then I see 5 people in the back row throwing up heals. I'm like, that's probably not the group for us. Like,
right. Yes.
That's some pretty beefy dudes,
Mm-hmm.
and there's freaking 5 healers in the group. It's like, can I burn down? Can we coordinate and kill one healer? Maybe. Are we going to be able to pull off killing 5 healers in a group of 20, without these other beefy dudes, putting some damage in us and us being able to recover? And so that's a very serious thing, or that happens regularly. So when you're throwing yourself into the group, you're dropping your Dawnbreaker on people. The initial Dawnbreaker may or may not be meant to kill people. Maybe it's coordinated with another Dawnbreaker, and in that moment, it is meant to kill people. Sometimes it's just a poke to assess who's taking the most damage and how many healers there have. Then we're going to retract from the ball group, and the second row, we're talking about the Phalanx, Spartan army. Front row pushes in or pushes back into the extreme outnumbered situation, and then when fatigue sets in or they need to reapply their buffs, they fall back, and the second row steps up to continue applying pressure while the front row gets their buffs reapplied, and then you switch back and forth. So that way the ball group continually feels pressure. It's not coordinated pressure. It's, if you've only got 2 people, first one's in applying pressure, then he comes out just as the second one pushes in. And so if you can create a scenario like that, you can kind of move the ball group off of where they're at. If they're all balled up in a single room, the likelihood we're going to kill this entire ball group in that room when there's no line of sight preventing those healers from throwing out their heals on the person that we kill. If we coordinate an ult dump on a group or on some people, we could. The Necro ult is the most powerful ultimate, I'd have to say, in the game because of major vulnerability. The fact that you can apply major vulnerability to a group of people is super dangerous. And one of the most devastating gear sets in the game is Vicious Death. So if you're a Magicka user or Stamina user, Vicious Death can be a great equalizer in fighting outnumbered. But ultimately, your goal is to get that ball group to start moving. If the ball group starts moving, it provides opportunity, because the healers probably won't want to stick to the back of the group. where they're taking damage, they're already staying at the back of the group away from you. The likelihood that they're going to come towards you and allow you to be damaging them while the group moves on is very low. So the healers are going to stay towards the front of the group and the front of the direction that the group's moving, which is farthest away from you. But what's going to happen is it's going to establish the tail, and then you can bite the tail. The healer's moving away. There's always that slower person or slower couple people that are trying to stand and fight or trying to hold their ground. And those are the people that you end up killing. And then that puts the ball group in a situation where they need to decide, are we going to stop our forward movement, or, hey, tough luck, Charles,
Yeah.
tail gets bit, you should have
Mhm.
moved with us. And sometimes the ball group comes back and then they kind of circle the wagons around the bodies, and res them. And in which case you got to continue to push them. How many times do you think we've lived this scenario, Icy?
Oh, so many times, especially the Spartan moments. That was definitely in the beginning when it was. I think it happened a lot with Senna and Old Man Kratos, Stam DK and Stamina Warden. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a lot. And then when Ket was running with us, it was a little bit easier, I think, because whenever he would run the healer, we'd be able to do the Spartan phalanx, interchange ourselves out with the ball group a lot easier, having a
Yeah.
healer in the group. But
Yeah,
oh
you
yeah,
could swim in the Zerg, right? When you've got a designated healer, you could stay in a little longer than and take a lot harder poke, right? When you've got a designated healer, as
right,
opposed to when it was just you and me, a Stam DK and a Stamden, we had to be on point with our changing of the guard.
right. Because I know now it hasn't happened too recently within the last few months, just because I've been playing my Argonian healer, providing a different level of support, whereas my Stam DK was more CC oriented, so it was required for me to be up in there with you to help lock people down and drain their stamina pool. But definitely during that stretch of our run with my character, my tune, oh yeah, absolutely, it was happening all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So attacking a ball group, ultimately, I can tell you this: if you're somebody that runs a ball group, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. You need to get your beefy guys up towards the front and push forward and run over those dudes. A lot of people will say, don't chase, don't chase. Don't chase applies to the onesies and twosies. Don't chase applies to them. But if your entire group is going to move and come through the hallway, you better bet that those two dudes, the two guys that are trying to get their 2VX or whatever, they need to backpedal, or push through. They need to know how they're going to handle that. As long as you're a ball group and you're moving as a group, not to make Icy in my life harder, but I'm telling you, from both sides of the line, if you're a 2VX, if you and your buddy are 2VXing and a ball group comes after you, you better have a contingency plan on what to do, because that's technically what they should do. They should say, look, we're not going to let you bully us. We're coming after you. Not in onesies and twosies. You're going to get you get all of us. So
Yeah, and just to add to that, same scenario with you're recording for 7 hours in Cyrodiil just for a 4 minute clip. Same thing for us, where whenever we do encounter a ball group, it's not 100% of the time that we're gonna crush them. We do have a lot of success for sure, but sometimes if we do get run over, it's because they ran us all the way down. They
yeah,
were a little bit more coordinated, because when we're both running two characters that have to be up in your face, we both run speed. We're both running either evasive predator, race against time, something that provides major expedition, so that when we're backpedaling, we can thin them out. And then when they're chasing, does everybody in the group also have major expedition? 9 times out of 10, they don't. Only some people do. And guess
yep,
what? that guy who does, if he's the only one, or maybe he's got a buddy, now we have a 2-on-1. Now we have a 2-on-2. We like our odds compared to the 2v10 that we just bumped into seconds before, and we just ran 2 rooms down. Those 2 guys kept up with us. Now we got a little fight on our hands. We smoke them, and now we have we'll say it was a 2v8. Now it's a 2v6, and the 2 tough guys, or the 2 guys who had the most skill, are dead. And now we could probably jump back into the fight with the 2v6 now that their strongest players are out, and clean them up.
Yeah.
So,
And because they weren't running major expedition, they're sprinting, burning stamina, right?
oh yeah,
They're running towards us, burning their stamina, like, I'm gonna get you guys. And it's just it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Not
Even-
enough in the tank. They're running to us and dead tired by the time they get to us.
even groups that we're running with or leading, sometimes we're flying through the sewers because our builds are designed to keep us fully healthy, if you would, at all points. And when we're running 6 rooms down and people are still kind of catch up, I remember some guy saying, I'm literally out of stamina just trying to keep up with you guys, and I have to pop potions just to keep up. Because,
And I had full stamina.
oh yeah, we got full stamina, and we're consistently, we all have almost 100% uptime on major expedition. And I guess it comes down to the PvE scenario. When you come down to a PvP area and you're not familiar with the environment or what the type of playstyle you need to have to be successful down here. And you kind of learn the hard way. And then even when you learn the hard way, did you really learn, or did you just experience it, realize it wasn't really for you, and then every time you do come back, you don't make any changes? I don't know what to tell you at that point.
Yeah. Speed is king in PvP. Speed is king in 1vxing as well. Because
And speed is king. Speed is awesome. I love, even in PvE, when I'm just doing my solo adventuring, I run race against time all the time just because I like getting to places quickly. It's fun.
yeah, you're going to have to create the right scenario, the right encounter. You're going to have to control the battlefield and where the fight's going to happen at. You're going to need speed. If you're trying to operate a slow build, it's too hard to disengage from the fight, and you pretty much are going to find yourself having to stand and fight where you're at most of the time. And maybe you have a grasp of how to use line of sight or whatever, but the fact that there's a deficit in speed compared to the people that are hunting you, they're always going to be on you. There is no way to disengage, and so the only out is for you to kill them or to die. But if you have superior speed, you can kite them out, stretch them out, create that kung fu movie, and kill all 10 kung fu masters, as they single file, come at you. And that's just a great scenario.
I think that would be, if we were going to, with all the different types of 1vx or whatever VX styles that there are, I'd probably say that's what ours is. The thin them out and reduce the numbers as the time goes on.
Yeah.
Thin them out with speed. I'd probably say that's our way that we usually fall back on. That's our method.
Yeah. It's weird. And maybe it's just where we're at in that moment in the day and time. Cause I do recall I'm on Thanos and you're on Volga. We come around a corner and there's 10 DC in front of us. There's no hesitation. There's no nothing, And I remember one of these scenarios, we come around the corner and I just go in and you're like, we're going in. I'm like, yeah, heck yeah, we are, let's get them. And so there is a different time and place. Now, if they would have killed us, we would have went back to base and we would have said, let's go back, because we could have played that smarter, or let's switch tunes, let me switch to whatever it will play to our advantage. And so there's always that too, but that's pretty much all I have for 1vxing. There is no magic to it. It's just being in the right place, the right time, after you've achieved the level of understanding or the training, after you've completed your training. right? And so that's what's your final take on 1vxing, Icy?
Let me see. So I guess if I'm gonna try to break it down into certain categories, you can thin them out, which is our preferred method with speed. Then I'll just pick Grim Hollow for this for one example. The finesse method where you can, I've seen, just because he does it on Nightblade, I think it's really cool, where you can kind of juggle everybody around you and use the trees, use the poles, use the rocks, use your stealth, use your shade to juke and do all these crazy little tricks while the group is still around you and you're doing all your maneuvering stuff and thinning them out and also applying pressure. Somebody's trying to get a res, hit him with the venom arrow. I think that the one that interrupts.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hit them with that so they can't get a res off. You keep the numbers the way they are now and keep doing work. One shot the guy here, do this and that, whatever. A lot of finesse into it, and there's a lot of guys who do it like that. I think Malcolm does the same thing, but with his sorcerer, which is still pretty cool. But again, same thing, a lot of finesse to it. And then the werewolf method, which is you just kind of brute force it, right? But obviously you have to have the right build, whatever that's going to be, and you kind of just fight it out. Throw your howls up there to heal while you're taking all this pressure from everybody, and you just kind of brute force it. That's probably the third method. And then I think what Vicor likes to do, from looking at his videos, it's mostly you're holding block a lot of the time, and you're waiting for that moment to just burst them down and whittle the numbers, and just keep going from there. And I think when you have more experience in the PvP world, when you watch these videos, you'll be able to see these things. Because I know when I first started watching Grim Hollow, I'd be like, wow, this is so freaking amazing and cool. But now that I've been in the mix for at least 8 months, 9 months now, I can kind of see behind the curtain and see how they do that. I'm trying to think of a magician channel, and I remember one guy, he would just review magician tricks and say, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is how he did that trick, whatever," or "Oh, that was pretty good. I have no idea how he could have actually done that." So magicians can still be fooled by other people within their same class, but they can still appreciate it for the amount of skill and what it takes to get to that level. So, at the end of the day, just get your experience in. That's really it. And you'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, it's just going to take time. You'll have one or two awesome moments that'll put gas in the tank and keeps you driving, but it just takes time. And if you can't go solo, and be by yourself in battlegrounds and fight outnumbered and throw yourselves into outnumbered situations, survive there, that gives you a good indication of what it's going to be like to try in 1vx. So
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's it.
yeah,
That's all I got. Ready
there
to.
are drills too, aside from the BGs. Icy and I worked on these as well, but you should always have a hard CC in your kit, and if you can, get a soft CC. So the hard CC is going to be a stun. A soft CC is going to be an immobilization or a root. And if you could get a stun in your kit somewhere, that's great. And make sure that whoever you're fighting is constantly being stunned when they're off CC immunity. And that's something that you can practice and train if you want to become better at PvP, is just get the muscle memory down to just consistently stay on that. I can tell you, if you run into Icy and he's on his stam DK, you're not going to have stamina. He's going to run you dry. So
Yeah, and of course, if you see me down there, you know I'm not alone, because I don't play solo. I don't fight fair. I try to always fight when I have an advantage, because that'll give me the most success. I particularly don't care for 1vxing. That's not my thing. But 2vxing, I'll do it all day.
yeah.
And I'll do my best with my support skills to help whoever I'm with succeed as much as they can. That's kind of how I like to run my stuff.
Yeah. You know, I enjoy coaching. When we're talking about 1vxing, I enjoy coaching. Before I met you, there was other people that I was coaching in the game, and there's just very few time for me to go out and like try and get this sweet 1vx video and things like that. Like, I'm not trying to put 1vx, like, make that my thing. I'm trying to make my thing a coach that's available to help people become better at PvP and fighting outnumbered. Therefore, I'm usually going to be rolling with one or two or three other people, small group stuff. The only time I get into large, like guild versus guild, is if it's a Saturday and we're going on a guild event in Cyrodiil, or if it's Mid-Year Mayhem or Imperial City events. And it's really fun to do the big, crazy, outnumbered situations. But more times than not, if you see me, I'm not alone. I either have someone with me that I'm working with or training, or trying to get that first, 2vx experience for them, and that's just the way it is. So
Yeah, and I think whenever you do tell me of the 1vx scenarios that you do run into, it's usually always when you're leveling a tune, so you're not even CP when those situations happen, but you still can pull them off.
yeah, and you can't recreate those or like plan for that. That scenario just kind of happens on its own. And like I said, I spend most of my time leveling my characters down there, so you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, definitely a risk leveling down the sewers. But I think that's it. Do you have any final words before we close it for good?
No, hopefully this helped everybody with a better understanding of 1vxing and just that whole scenario and training and stuff. I'll try and link in the descriptions the videos that we talked about fighting outnumbered and what level are you PvP. And we'll also have our Discord link there too. So if you want to visit us or you want to set up a training time, or you just want to meet us and hang out with us, all of that sounds awesome. So join us in Discord and we'll see you there.
Awesome. And with that, have a good night, guys. See ya.
See ya. You're going to say bye-bye, Argonians.
Bye bye, Rogonian.